Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and see how an ordinary day on the calendar holds just a staggering amount of world-changing history. We all check the date every single day, right? Usually it's just to see when our next meeting is or maybe figure out how far away the weekend is. But if we stop and look really closely at one specific date, it acts almost like a core sample of the entire human experience. 226. Now, you might be wondering, what is so special about that number? Well, that represents the exact day of the year in the Gregorian calendar we're digging into today, specifically the 226th day, or the 227th if it happens to be a leap year. I'm talking about August 14th. On the surface, it seems completely arbitrary, just a random Tuesday or Friday in the middle of the summer for the Northern Hemisphere. But what actually happens when we look at a single day across all of human history? When we zoom out and treat this one single orbital coordinate as a vertical slice of time, we don't just find a random, disconnected assortment of dates. We find a thrilling, interconnected narrative of human progress, conflict, and sheer innovation. We literally see empires fall, borders get redrawn, and society take massive leaps forward. Section 1. Ancient Upheavals. The Fight for Power. If there is one thing we humans have been remarkably consistent about, it's the raw fight for power. Corruption, intense political maneuvering, grand displays of authority, these were just as intense thousands of years ago as they are today. Across vast empires, August 14th was a day of massive political reckoning. In 74 BC, the Western Han minister, Kuo Guang, presented articles of impeachment against the brand new emperor, Liu He. Just 4 years later, over in Rome in 70 BC, the politician Gaius Verres is found guilty of corruption. And get this, his own lawyer literally abandoned the case halfway through because it was just that hopeless. Then, by 29 BC, Octavian is holding a magnificent triumph in Rome to celebrate his absolute power and victory over the Dalmatian tribes. It's wild to think all of this is happening on this exact same spot on the calendar. Let's jump forward 1,000 years to 1040. And yes, I'm talking about the very same Macbeth from William Shakespeare's famous play. On August 14th, King Duncan I of Scotland is killed in battle against his first cousin and bitter rival, Macbeth. And just like that, Macbeth actually seized the Scottish throne. We all know the famous piece of fiction, but the actual gritty history happened right here on this date. This date also brilliantly illustrates the art of ancient evasion and trickery across completely different cultures. In 1183, we have the Taira clan fleeing to western Japan with the young Emperor Antoku and 3 sacred treasures, desperately trying to escape the Minamoto clan. Then, fast forward to 1264, and we see the Genoese completely outsmarting the Venetians at the Battle of Cesena. They managed to trick the Venetian galley fleet into sailing east, which allowed the Genoese to capture an entire trade convoy. Talk about a day of high-stakes deception. Section 2. Revolts, Revolutions, and New Lands. Reshaping the map of the world. As we transition into the age of exploration, August 14th becomes a day heavily defined by the aggressive drawing of new borders and, of course, the violent clashes that come with them. We see a rapid expansion into new frontiers. In 1592, the explorer John Davis makes the first recorded sighting of the Falkland Islands. By 1848, the U.S. Congress officially organizes the Oregon Territory. But the sources show this history is deeply complicated. This expansion was so often accompanied by the devastating displacement of indigenous peoples. On this exact date in 1784, Russian fur trader Grigory Shelikov stormed a Kodiak Island refuge rock. This resulted in the Awag massacre, where over 500 Aleutic people were tragically killed. Now, let's move to 1791 and see how these tensions build into an absolute explosion of resistance. On an August night, slaves from plantations in Saint-Domingue gathered for a voodoo ceremony at Bois Caiman, led by Hungan Dodi Bookman. This single, highly consequential gathering on August 14th marked the official start of the Haitian Revolution. It was a truly monumental turning point in human history and the global fight against slavery. Decades later, the date witnesses another profound geographic and cultural shift in North America. In 1842, the Second Seminole War officially ends. But for the Seminoles, this conclusion meant being forced from their native Florida, drastically reshaping the demographics and the very map of the United States. Moving on to Section 3, Firsts in Industry and Tech. The building blocks of modern society. As we push into the late 19th and early 20th centuries, this state undergoes a total transformation. It becomes a day of massive structural, technological, and administrative milestones. I mean, think about how these seemingly disconnected events laid the literal and bureaucratic foundations of the modern world we live in right now. In 1880, the construction of the iconic Cologne Cathedral in Germany is finally completed, which is a massive architectural feat. 5 years later, in 1885, Japan issues its very first patent, and it happens to be for a rust-proof paint. Then, as technology rapidly speeds up, France becomes the first country to introduce motor vehicle registration in 1893. By 1935, we see social infrastructure modernizing too, as the United States passes the Social Security Act. On this one day, scattered across a few decades, we get major shifts in architecture, intellectual property, transportation laws, and social welfare. Section 4. Modern Conflicts and Global Shifts. A century of conflict and diplomacy. Zooming out to the modern era, August 14th stands as a neutral witness to major global shifts, new alliances, and unfortunately, deeply tragic conflicts. Welcome to the 20th and 21st centuries. In 1900, the Eight-Nation Alliance occupies Beijing in a massive international campaign to end the Boxer Rebellion. Fast forward just 47 years on the exact same date, and a huge geopolitical shift occurs when Pakistan celebrates its Independence Day, officially marking its historic partition from British India. And the sources show that the late 20th and early 21st centuries saw this date repeatedly mark the beginning, escalation, or halting of deeply complex regional conflicts. In 1969, Operation Banner begins in Northern Ireland. In 1974, the second phase of the Turkish invasion in Cyprus commences. Jump to 2006, and we see a fragile UN truce in Lebanon actually holding, even as the sources note concurrent clashes with Israel and totally separate unrest happening in Sri Lanka. It is a day of intense, undeniable geopolitical pressure. But sometimes, amidst all this grand political movement, the modern world just forcefully stops. Like on August 14th, 2003, when a massive power outage known as the Northeast Blackout struck the United States and Canada. It left millions of people entirely in the dark and perfectly demonstrated just how reliant and honestly how fragile our modern electrical grid truly is.
It's really fascinating how a single calendar date can host completely opposite ends of the diplomatic spectrum. Take 2013, for instance, when Egypt is forced to declare a national emergency amid severe political unrest. Yet contrast that with just 2 years later in 2015, when the U.S. Embassy in Cuba formally reopens, a day that was widely hailed as pushing aside old barriers. Serious conflict and historic reconciliation, both sharing the exact same anniversary.
Which brings us to Section 5, the bizarre and unexpected, subtitle Parachuting Beavers. Yup, you heard that right. Okay, so we've covered some incredibly heavy historical milestones today, from ancient emperors to modern geopolitics, but I promised you something entirely unexpected to round out this date. Let me introduce you to the parachuting beavers. I am completely serious. In 1948, the traditional ways of relocating beavers in the U.S. just weren't working, so the Idaho Fish and Game Department actually devised a 3-step plan. Step 1, identify nuisance beavers that are causing local problems. Step 2, strap these beavers into leftover World War II parachutes. And Step 3, drop them directly out of airplanes into the remote Idaho wilderness. National Geographic actually notes it beautifully here, saying to increase the survival rate, one conservation officer turned to, yes, parachutes. This just goes to show the sheer, unpredictable quirkiness of human history. The exact same calendar date that witnessed the coronation of medieval Scottish kings and the end of major wars also witnessed airborne beavers floating down into the Idaho forests. You literally cannot make this stuff up. So what should you take away from this explainer? Well, from the Roman Empire to sweeping technological firsts, all the way to parachuting beavers, every single day is a sprawling canvas for history. And it leaves us with one pretty provocative thought. If all this happened on August 14th over the centuries, what monumental, world-changing, or perhaps completely bizarre event is quietly unfolding around us right now, today? Keep your eyes open, everyone, because history is always happening.